Φίλες και φίλοι της εκπομπής μας, ο Hephaestus στο Orange, σας καλωσορίζουμε στην εκπομπή μας, στο ραντεβού μας του Σεπτεμβρίου μετά από το καλοκαιρινό διάλειμμα. Ελπίζω να είχατε ένα πολύ ευχάριστο καλοκαίρι και να ξεκουραστήκατε και να έχουμε και ένα πολύ ευχάριστο και απαλό και όχι τόσο κρύο φθινόπωρο εδώ στη Βιέννη, γιατί νομίζω ότι όλοι εμείς από τον Νότο νοσταλγούμε αμέσως με το που θα μπει το φθινόπωρο, νοσταλγούμε πάλι τον Νότο και τις διακοπές. Freundinnen und Freunde, Zuhörerinnen und Zuhörer unserer Sendung Hephaestus bei Orange, ich heiße Sie willkommen in unserem Septembertermin nach der Sommerpause. Ich hoffe auch, Sie haben einen schönen, erholsamen Sommer gehabt. Der eine oder der andere hat wahrscheinlich auch oder hoffentlich Griechenland besucht, und ich wünsche Ihnen allen auch einen milden und sehr angenehmen Herbst. Wir haben auch zum Start der neuen Saison, eben nach der Pause, eine sehr besondere Sendung. Eine Sendung, die nicht das gewöhnliche Profil unserer Sendungen hat, die ein bisschen, also the bright side of life sind. We have here shows about art, about culinary, about the South, about beautiful places of not only Greece, of the world, and about cosmopolitan life. And this time we leave our comfort zone and we go to the dark side of, not of the moon, but of the earth, because we have a very special guest, Mr. Ilias Chatzis. I have to thank you to be my guest today. We planned this rendezvous very long, but you are also unfortunately very busy with your work and with your mission. Mr. Chatzis is the chief of the section by the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, but he's the chief of the section Human Trafficking and Migrant Smuggling. So you understand that the topic is not easy. Thank you to be here and to clear things for us and to bring this very difficult theme near.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I know we have been trying to organize it for almost a year.
Yes.
So it's been a pleasure to finally make it here. And I'll be very happy to discuss with you these two awful crimes actually that are happening around us.
Yes, thank you. But we start a little bit easier with your life and your studies and all this, and how it can be that somebody becomes the chief of such organization. So you started with a law school?
Yes, I'm a lawyer. I practice criminal law back home, and so I practice also. And I always had an interest in international criminal law. So basically I did a master's degree on war studies.
War studies?
Yeah, London. I was with a scholarship. This is actually the early 90s. It's after the first Gulf War. It's the moment that the Yugoslav wars were erupting. So everybody was very interested in criminal responsibility of perpetrators of the first war crimes. You know, how can people be held accountable? It was the first war in Europe since the Second World War. So we didn't know there would be another one, 20 years down the road. But at the time, it was like a really new area of work.
Oh, so really? So I can imagine war studies are only for the military, but actually, you can say it's after-war studies.
Yes,
You can act after the war.
It's basically, it was looking at the personal responsibility of people involved in war, like the responsibility of the military. There's war crimes, the right to protect, the obligation to protect civilians, all the horrible things that were happening in former Yugoslavia at the time were actually the trigger for, Rwanda followed shortly after. And strangely enough, after my studies, I went back home, I did my military service, and practicing law was not as I was thinking it would be.
That would be also my question.
Yes.
Was it like you expected? No,
not at all. So actually, the first opportunity that I found to go abroad and kind of to try to practice this kind of how can I say, like bridge that I found between international work and legal work. I founded in Yugoslavia, so I went to Bosnia. I arrived in Bosnia 6 months after the Dayton Peace Accords, and I stayed in Bosnia for 6 years. So I really looked at the implementation of the Dayton Peace Accords at the very critical part of Bosnia, which was left undecided at the time by the parties. So I stayed there for 6 years. Then I left Bosnia to go to Serbia, where I worked on organized crime and war crimes. So I was working with the OSCE, a regional organization on security and cooperation. So we helped the country set up the first organized crime courts, the war crime courts. And then I moved to Romania, where I was working with, actually it was an initiative led by an Austrian, Erhard Buschek at the time. It was a stability pact for Southeastern Europe. He was trying to help the countries of the region to enter NATO and hopefully the European Union at some stage. Mm-hmm. And there I was privileged enough to be hired by the UN, and I worked first on organized crime. Then I worked on terrorist prevention, and since 2012, I have the job that I have now. Basically, I set up the entire section, the whole operations of the UNODC on human trafficking and migrant smuggling. There was nothing when I took it.
Like a private person, I understand these themes more, that something criminal, smuggling and human trafficking, that war, because there I have to ask you, where is the consensus of our plan? Is the UN has the main law, what is allowed, not? You understand what I mean?
Yes. About 20 years ago, the countries adopted the Convention against Transnational Organized Crime, which has 3 protocols. 1 protocol against human trafficking, 1 protocol against migrant smuggling, and 1 protocol against small arms. All of them were negotiated. I mean, the convention was signed in Palermo, in Italy, but UNODC is the guardian, as we say, of the convention and the protocols. Okay. So here is the main UN body that helps countries implement the convention and the protocols.
But
so that's the reason why we're
here.
Yes.
But it's a consensus of all countries of our world.
Yes,
actually.
But just to add that, of course, there are other UN agencies and bodies that deal with elements of the crime. So you have the human rights.
Yes.
You have the refugees. You have the International Organization for Migration. You have UN Women. You have UNDP for Development, which are all elements and need to be taken into account when you talk about trafficking and smuggling. But the heart of the crime, the criminal justice aspect, is dealt by here in Vienna.
Okay. Φίλες και φίλοι της εκπομπής μας, συνεχίζουμε με τον εκλεκτό μας καλεσμένο κύριο Χατζή. Friends of our show for tonight, our guest, Mr. Chatzis, is here to talk with us about a very big problem of our planet, and if it's so big that everybody is actually should be how to say, annoyed about this, but we don't know a lot, I think. No, let's start again. After Bruce Springsteen chasing the bad guys politically, you have two topics. One more more published, more known to the public, and one really, for me, and I'm not the exception, I think, less. So you have the human trafficking and smuggling of migrants. The second thing, also as a Greek, we have a big topic with a lot of NGOs and a lot of news and a lot of also in Austria and all this. But what is about trafficking, human trafficking?
I think you're correct to say that they're two different crimes. In reality, they kind of overlap in many cases.
Okay.
Because, the migrant who is smuggled and comes to a third country is usually without documents, is usually living below the radar screen, try to go unnoticed. But at the same time, he needs to live. He or she needs to live, needs to find money, maybe has family, needs to take care of his health. So there's a lot of possibilities for exploitation and a lot of possibilities of abusing these people. And actually, I think this is one of the main reasons that we see quite increase of human trafficking in cases where you have big migration flows in a country, irregular migration flows. And I think it makes sense in a way. Going back to human trafficking and the difference between the two. Human trafficking is basically an umbrella crime, a crime that includes very many crimes. Mm-hmm. It includes the forced prostitution of women, girls, men, boys. It includes the forced labor of people in agriculture, in construction, in the hospitality industry, in many sectors of the economy that we cannot even imagine that people would really be enslaved to produce for us or to service us as clients. It includes other elements like the forced marriages, the selling of children, child trafficking. One in three victims of human trafficking globally is a child, and the numbers of human trafficking are like mind-boggling. We as an office do not publish a global figure about how many trafficking victims they exist, because we know that a lot of the victims are undetected, and we know that sometimes this crime is kind of overseen, is not really seen by the authorities as such. So a lot of times the exploitation that these people are going through is not qualified as human trafficking, so they don't measure it. But there are figures out there that basically talk about 50 million victims at any given time around the world as trafficking victims. We have a database, I think, for at least 500,000 of registered cases, and these are the people that have been actually registered as human trafficking victims, have gone through the process, been identified, and we know it's the tip of the iceberg. Really, it's the tip of the tip of the iceberg.
I read a few months ago a criminal story, like not an article, like there's a roman, and the story was starting in Indonesia, I think. They sell the daughters, the handsome girls, officially, like the guy with the limo with a big car is coming to the village, and the families are very happy to get money for the daughter, and they don't even know what happened. They think their child will have a very good future because this very distinguished type comes out from the car and take the girl, and he will take care about her for this. So they are
Yes.
happy to have the money. They are happy also for the future of the daughter.
Yes. Human trafficking is based on the fact that people are in extreme need. And because they are in need, they do fall into traps that the criminals we set up would really believe in deceptions, and they will fall victims to this crime. But it does happen everywhere, so it's not a matter only of a crime that happens in the least developed countries in the global south. It happens everywhere. It happens around us. It happens in Austria. Austria publishes figures publicly that they have, every year about the trafficking victims that they identify. So it happens also here in Europe. It happens in the global south. It happens in Africa. It happens everywhere. The difference is that you may have different forms of human trafficking,
Yes.
depending on the situation and usually the economic situation of a country. So, for example, in Europe, there's a large. I think there's an equal number of forced prostitution, like sex trafficking and trafficking for forced labor. In other regions of the world, you have different forms. In Africa, you have child trafficking as the most prevalent form, almost 60% in some parts of Africa. Child
They
trafficking
are
is also
kidnapping the children.
as well, but it's. Sometimes we all under the impression of the movies where we see,
Yes.
the as you said, the limo coming in, snatching the child from the street
Yes.
and then selling it to. It could happen. It's possible, but this could follow also into other crimes like kidnapping or other crimes. Usually, the trafficking needs grooming, needs persuasion, needs deception, and sometimes families are also complicit in
Yes.
that, because sometimes, as you said yourself, sometimes could be the only way of survival for the family or for the child itself. In the global north, in the rich countries, child trafficking is usually for sexual exploitation. In the global south, it is usually for forced labor. It is usually for labor, so it's different reasons. In the global south, it's it's because of economic circumstances and the dire economic situation of the countries. In the global north, it is usually because of dysfunctional families, lack of societal care, and of course the advance of internet, which opens,
You can sell
new
and buy
way.
everything.
You can sell and buy everything. It provides also a platform for, this beautiful world that has opened up with the internet that offers so many opportunities for all of us. An entire new world. It has so many dark corners, as I say, and they are exploited. This is the online sexual exploitation in particular, which for us is extremely concerning, of children. The dissemination of sexually abusive material, streaming of services, of sexual acts. These are all things that did not exist 20 years ago, but now they are part of the main part of the crime.
I was once participating in a conference between Germany and Czechia, because they have this border. It's very critical border between the two countries with very dark regions. And I remember, I was only the moderator, but I remember two things. One was the cases of women from Africa using for prostitution, and the cause was voodoo, and so the policemen could not react about. They didn't know what to do against this. If the woman were sitting there in the police station and was really terrified because she was absolutely sure that her family is in danger in Africa,
Yes.
because the bad guy had did voodoo to the family,
Yes.
and so they were like laughing and, no, you don't believe it. But it was the reality of this woman.
Yes.
You cannot say it's nothing.
No, we have a lot of cases like this. We know a lot of cases, but we also, in general, we know a lot of cases where religious sects are basically using this type of beliefs. So not only Nigeria, but also other parts of the world. I don't want to name countries just because you said Nigeria. Where basically they're using religious beliefs, especially in as I said, in sects, in communities which are a little bit marginalized, to convince people that this is part of the ritual, this is part of the process, and to basically kind of force them into situations, fearing that if they don't do, something horrible would happen to them. And that's why I said trafficking is an umbrella crime. It's very difficult to define as one type. It's the behavior which is criminalized, not the actual crime. It manifests itself differently. As I said, it's a person on the scaffolder outside a building that has been renovated, is working without a salary, is undocumented migrant, is been, not paid, not fed, sleeping, in horrible conditions, or sometimes not even able to move beyond the construction area. Is the strawberry picker in the plantation. It's the woman who's in the streets, prostitution. So it can be so many different things, and that's why it's a crime that I say sometimes it's. This wide definition is a curse and a blessing at the same time. A curse because it expands and new crimes come into play, and a blessing because if it was not this definition, these crimes would go unpunished. Just to give you an example, one of the most sort of recent trends that we see in human trafficking is what we call the forced criminality. Basically, the victims are forced to commit crimes for the criminals. Pickpocketing, shoplifting, drug trafficking. And in the past, and right now, our global data, so that it's almost 10%, I think could be actually over 10%, but around 10% of all cases globally. 8 years ago, we didn't have this figure.
Okay.
But these types of crimes existed. So it's just that we as we're learning the crime, we're learning how to identify new types of crime. Thus, we're able to identify these types. This existed. It didn't come up as a new type of crime. It was there. So, the shop you would see them sometimes, when they found by security, they usually, they could be children, they could be, young women or, men they look like they are foreigners or things like that. And in many cases like this, they are actually, this is a type. This can be a type of trafficking. You see that?
I'm sorry, but I'm thinking really on Charles Dickens had these bands of boys. And
this could be trafficking today. This could be trafficking today.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
This could be trafficking.
I have this picture in
this could be trafficking. Exactly. But, you were right.
But the boss of them was, although one of them. And for me, it was interesting. 15 years ago at this conference, I heard the first time from the criminal commissars, they were there, that there is a type of new boss, mafia, in this case, in Europe at least. You don't recognize anymore like the boss in Dickens' story. There are not the guys with the open the collar with a golden chain and all this. But they are really businessmen with the koffer,
a suitcase
full of money. Yes. They go to the politicians and they say, "I build for you a hospital if you don't bother my business." And this is really a dilemma.
You're touching a lot of very important issues here. Right? No, these are really. I mean, the links with corruption. It's for us something very important that we're looking at. Actually, we will be publishing now, hopefully by October, a regional report on how corruption fuels human trafficking in Latin America. So we're going to be doing a region. This is going to be based on cases that we see in court, so not only anecdotal information, but actually cases. And we want to do a global report also that hopefully will be done by the end of the year, because we do see links. It's just we haven't measured them yet, and we cannot qualify them. We could not qualify them yet. On the issue of the organization of the gangs, our data show that the majority of trafficking cases are organized crime cases. So it's not the individual trafficker that will take, the victim and will exploit her or him. It's usually organized crime. And many of the individual cases that we see, we fear that they're actually part of wider gangs, but usually the authorities will stop at the case because they are happy to save one victim and to arrest the one who was exploited without looking beyond that. And here you have also one other element that touches to what I said about the forced criminality. In prostitution, sometimes the traffickers would use a woman to run an illegal brothel. So she will be the madam. Why? Because when the police comes in, they will arrest her, and she will be the one prosecuted, and they will be shielded. But usually these women are victims that are actually given a little bit of a better life and used by the traffickers to control other victims, and they are put in that position. Authorities sometimes need to look whether these are real perpetrators or whether they're actually victims of the crime. So it's like, wherever you look, it has different angles that come up. From our side, what we try to do as an office of the United Nations, as the Office on Drugs and Crime here in Vienna, and we have global operations. So we have, I think we're about 120 people now all over the world. In Vienna, here is the headquarters, the global team, but then we have in many countries around the world. We try to help them, first of all, understand the crime. As we discussed now, it's so many angles that you see. Not everything will be relevant for everyone. Not all aspects of trafficking will be present in a country. But we can help them understand where to look at and be able to qualify the criminal behaviors that they see when necessary as trafficking. We help them also develop legislation. And criminalization is a key thing. Without the proper law, without criminalizing trafficking, and try to treat it as some other type of exploitation, forced labor, not trafficking for forced labor, but forced labor, this could lead to the perpetrator basically walking either totally free or with an administrative fine. Most of the times, for example, forced labor is not seen as trafficking. Forced labor can be also a labor violation. So it can be a bad contract. It can be treated as bad labor conditions, not as trafficking. So we help them understand what is the threshold, where do you draw the line?
Like the agencies with the homework, now with the nurturing at home for old people or like this. I heard also about promotion of these agencies. They take most of the money of these working women. Συνεχίζουμε, αγαπητοί φίλοι και φίλες της εκπομπής μας, με τον κύριο Χατζή σήμερα μαζί μας και μιλάμε για ένα πολύ μεγάλο θέμα που απασχολεί όλο το πλανήτη ουσιαστικά και είναι το... Πώς το διαβάζει? Ναι, διάβασα στα αγγλικά, είπαμε πώς μεταφράζεται στα γαλλικά, μόνο στα ελληνικά δεν είπαμε. Είσαστε ο διευθυντής του τμήματος του ΟΗΕ
για την καταπολέμηση της εμπορίας ανθρώπων, εμπορία ανθρώπων το λέμε.
Ναι. Και το smuggling, διακίνηση μεταναστών. Illegal, ουσιαστικά παράνομη διακίνηση μεταναστών, γιατί η διακίνηση μεταναστών μπορεί να είναι και... We thank our guest again, Mr. Chatzis is here. We are talking about the UN mission initiative sector and session against human trafficking and smuggling. Yes. But we were talking about also very where is what. Where is the problem between what is legal and what is illegal
with regard to trafficking?
Yes,
and you mentioned a very interesting type of trafficking, which is what we call in our jargon domestic servitude. Yeah. Basically, people who are used in domestic households, in houses, to perform work in the house without either being paid or working extremely long hours, sometimes without food. We had a lot of cases where people were literally locked up in houses to take care of the elderly or of people that had problems, and they were in bed, they were bedridden. Mm-hmm. And these people would receive minimum food. They would need to work like every day for exhausting hours. They need to do different tasks, clean the house, take care of the sick person and things like that. The personal documents were taken and things like that. So yes, in some cases, this is a type of trafficking. The question always is, what makes a case of a bad employer or a bad contractual circumstance and makes it a trafficking case. Mm-hmm. And the main element for this is the fact that there needs to be some form of deception, some form of abuse of a position, of vulnerability, some form of exercise of force or threat of use of force. Mm-hmm. I think, this type of elements. And it needs to be for exploitation. But I have to say that it's always at the discretion of the courts to decide whether this case is really a trafficking case or whether it was not and it was, some other type of exploitation. It's always a big question. And many countries actually struggle with this because, as I said, in some cases, they will be happy to save the victim, rescue a victim, and prosecute the perpetrator. And in some cases, they will actually try to go for whatever is the easiest. Whatever crime is the easier to prove. So the person will not live without any punishment, and the victim will regain control of her or his life. So that's, I think, the important question. Why sometimes we see figures which are kind of not representative of the gravity of the situation out there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. If you allow me one thing, for us, this is an important part of our mission, is to take stock of all these different types of trafficking, help countries share the experience, explain what they see so others who see the same thing can learn from it. We do a lot of trainings with prosecutors, with police, with judges. We help a lot in international cooperation. In Europe, the European countries are very lucky because they have a number of layers of regional cooperation. They have, the Council of Europe. They have the Organization for Security and Cooperation. They have, of course, the European Union with very strong ties between the countries. But this does not exist in other parts of the world. And it does not exist between European countries and other parts of the world. Okay. So a lot of times what seems to be the most obvious thing that can be done is not done. And we see a lot of places where countries are actually real close to each other and would not be cooperating, or they will not have, because of different conditions, or they will not have the means to cooperate. We had one case, for example, where a country from Central Asia, there were victims found in Central America. And, the country, Central America, was saying, how did these people find themselves here? We don't have links. What is the flow? They were, smuggled and then trafficked. And they were asking us, can you help us get in touch, this country? Can you help us start a dialogue to understand what is the trend and see how we can, find the criminals and protect the victims?
But I have the feeling even here it's not obvious because I understand like this, that you have to be very, very alert to discover the after which corner comes the next variation of crime.
We have also new types of trafficking that are totally new and did not exist in the past. And these are mostly related to the cyber world. we have what we call the cyber scams. So these are basically huge criminal operations currently in Southeast Asia, but we have information that the criminal organizations are trying to create them also elsewhere, other regions of the world, and where basically people are recruited from all over the world on the promise of work on a tech company in Southeast Asia. And these are, usually young people from low-income countries, but with quite good IT skills. And when they arrive in the country, most of the times they are offered a different type of contract or no contract at all. They put in a compound and they are forced to commit fraud online. And these are the telephone calls you receive sometimes, telling you that it's the bank or it's, I don't know, Amazon or another company.
Amazon.
It's the emails you receive. And actually, these people need to bring money to the criminals there on the spot, or they get punished. And they get punished, we're talking about rapes, beatings, electrocutions, very serious things. And these are massive numbers. And I'm saying it because I read in the news, I think it was in April, an operation in the Philippines, in 3 of these compounds, there were more than 3,000 people liberated. 3,000 people in one operation. 3,000 people, 3,000 victims. And this thing did not exist before. Now it's possible because of the connectivity, because of the advance of internet, and all these cyber services that we have, and it has been made possible. And it's a totally new type of trafficking. It did not exist.
Do you have a certain project you are proud of? And you went
yes,
to
yes.
you went to
Actually we have a project that is coming up. We're discussing it as we're coming here to talk to you. It has to do with the victims of this crime, what we call the survivors, the people that really came out and managed to stand back on their feet, to regain their lives and all. So we're going to hold an international forum of survivors of human trafficking here in Vienna next summer. And this is something we're putting a lot of efforts in. We'll try to make it very representative, so we'll invite victims from all over the world to come and share the experience, because for us, the point is not to relieve or to explain what they suffered, but to understand from them what needs to be done, to tell us from their own experience what was not done properly, what led them to the situation, what could the police, the prosecutor, or somebody else could do differently, and what would help them and other people like them really, as I said, regain their lives and stand back on their feet. So that's something that I'm quite proud of, and I hope it goes well. We will have very high hopes. We're going to hold it here in Austria, the first one. And we're already in touch with many of these organizations and try already to mobilize them to have really good representation here.
This is a good bridge to my next question. What could we do as private persons, not the FBI, not the Interpol, and
not UNODC.
Not only to be astonished and shocked and oh my God, really,
Yes.
but can I take care of something that I can do active, like proactive?
I think it's a very good question. I'm often asked about it, and I don't have a very good answer. The reason is that this is a crime, so that it's a very serious crime. So the responsibility mainly is on the authorities to prevent, prosecute, and protect. They have to do the job, but it is a crime also that is connected with the model, the economic development model that we have adopted, the consumer, a model that we have adopted. So there's some things that can be done, and for me, the first of all has to start with the basics. It has to do with condemnation of violence, condemnation of aggression, in all our lives, gender respect, rights of women, gender parity. All of these things are when they're lacking, they're leading to situations where trafficking can occur. So the first one is to condemn violence, to really, also as parents, those of us that have kids, nephews, nieces, friends, kids, just really teach them, especially boys, that, violence is not, the key. It's there are other ways of doing things. Second is to be really, really aware of how to use this new cyber world that we're living in.
Yes.
To reap the benefits and to protect ourselves from all the bad things that are hiding there as well. And this again is for the children, and again for the new generation, for the younger generation that is much more hooked to this to this new world. And that's something that we have to. This for me has to become, for example, and I think it already is, at least in Austria. It's a standard part of the curriculum, in schools, yes. How to use, your mobile, how to use your internet, how to protect yourself from predators on the internet and all of these things. Another thing that we can do is, as private citizens, here I'm talking as a citizen myself, is put pressure on the governments, on your representatives, on your elected representatives, on the mayors, on the politicians, to really keep the focus on this crime, not to let it drop. Really put the money that are needed. Really fund the organization that can support this crime. Make the investment to explain to the law enforcement, to the prosecution, to the judges what this crime is. Make the investment to really understand better this crime. I think a lot of these things are done, but we have to keep the pressure on. And at the end of the day, as consumers, also be responsible on how we consume things and what we consume. Mm-hmm. And I know that the private sector is very much aware, is very much conscious of the damage that the reputational damage that a trafficking case in the supply chain could do. And we have to ask them that they really respect the rules, that they really follow the labor regulations. And I mean, they're making so much money, from all this. I mean, they really can make. For me, the argument that we are such a big company, we're doing enough, but we're such a big company, we cannot control our supply chain, really doesn't hold water. If it's such a big company, you really need to make the investment to make sure your supply chain all the way to the bottom, is clean of human trafficking. And actually, as UN, we're doing also a big effort to do this. We have a massive supply chain. It was, I think, $29 billion in 2022. And we are like so many agencies. So we're doing a big effort now. We have established a special task force to develop special procedures for suppliers, to develop a code of conduct, to have sanctions for those that are found in violation, and to make sure that they're not part of the UN supply chain. So these rules apply to us as well.
Very short. We have only a few minutes, but my last question. Have you ever been in danger? You had really, really fear that you die. Really a dangerous situation.
Yes, but not in relation to my current job. It was when I was in Bosnia. There was a terrorist that was a hand grenade thrown in my office. Yes. But it was not in relation to this job. It was in relation to the.
But during your career,
it was election night, and there was I was working at home. I was working in the office until quite late. There was no internet then. And there was a grenade thrown underneath my car, and I could see the car like fly in front of me. And actually, I was behind the windows, and I was very lucky because the terrace absorbed the blast. Otherwise, the glass from the windows would have really. There was no bulletproof glass or anything. It was just simple glass. So I was very lucky. Yeah, it was once. Yeah.
And the world also, because you're here, you're struggling, and you have your mission. And I thank you very much to be our guest for tonight. And I thank you for this interview and for the very, very precious informations. And
can I say just something before you close? It's been a pleasure. And one of the things that we can do is you, the journalists, really keep up the pressure. Really keep your eyes on this crime. Don't drop it. Don't look only at the high-profile cases. Really maintain an interest in this. This makes a lot of difference out there, and people are listening to you. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you also. Εμείς σας περιμένουμε στο ραντεβού μας τον Οκτώβριο με έναν εξαιρετικό καλεσμένο της Κυπριακής Πρεσβείας. Wir erneuern unseren Termin, unser Rendezvous für Oktober. In unserer Sendung dann ein sehr spezieller Gast, der neue Botschafter der zypriotischen Botschaft in Wien. Und wir freuen uns sehr. Und bis dahin machen Sie gut und haben Sie eine so gute Zeit und einen sehr netten Herbst.